So welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Alana James. The conversation that we're about to have is actually my favorite conversation of the hundreds and hundreds I have done for graduate students. This is an exercise that I actually do in all kinds of settings. And if we have a minute at the end, I'll tell you how you might want to morph this exercise into getting published and some other things in our lives. So we start off a new adventure, and we're going to have at the end of it a specific outcome. And then we go through the path of that adventure. And a great many of us, maybe even most of us, tend to kind of go our own way. And we're not as good at looking at the end as we can be. And because of that, I've seen a lot, especially in the master's and doctoral world, especially in the doctoral world, I've seen people stumble. So let's ask ourselves, which is harder, breaking trail? If any of you are skiers, cross-country skiers, especially, you may have had experience of breaking trail in deep powder. Very, very difficult to do, very exhausting to do, compared to following a trail that has been broken before you. So as graduate students, you have the trail broken before you if you will take the time to look for it and scope it out. And that's what today's exercise is all about. And Lewis Carroll reminds us that if we don't know where we're going, any road will get us there. So we want to find the road that will get you through to your graduation as easily as possible. Our agenda looks like this is an exercise. So I'm going to talk about where you find models for finished dissertations. I'm take you through an exercise that I did the exercise, but I did it not aimed at any one topic, but overviewing dissertations. So because of that exercise, you're going to leave with some understanding of how the reviewer looks at things and sort of the scope of what we see when these dissertations come into us. And then I'm going to take you through steps to do your own in-depth discovery and how you might decide and analyze what you find. And then I'll take Q&A. So, okay, first step in this exercise is you're going to need to find models of finished products. My standard recommendation for PhDs is that you find 5 finished dissertations. 1 that is from your supervisor, if that is possible. At least 1 from your program. Doesn't matter topic and anything else, just gives you a sense of that's going to be good for showing you the formatting and the overall expectations. A couple of those even would be useful to you. Another one is going to use your methodology. Another one is going to come close to your topic. It's lovely if you can find one that is an award winner in your field. And finally, as you're looking through all of these, fingers crossed, you come across somebody whose writing is really good. And you think to yourself, oh, I wish I could engage my reader as well as this author engaged me. And then you're going to put that one aside. So those are your 5 models. In addition to that, or maybe within your finding your models, if you know anybody who has graduated from your program, ask them for theirs. It's a compliment to be asked to see your final work. So don't hesitate to do it if you know anybody, and don't hesitate to go to your advisor or your supervisor, or whatever your university calls the head of your committee, or anyone on your committee, and ask them for examples of dissertations where they recommend. Somebody that because when we when we're part of your committee, most of the time we get a copy of the final product. And many of us have those on our shelves. So they can reach out and say, oh, yeah, this one was good. I remember some good things about this. That'll give you a sense of the not only the place you are going, but maybe some of the things you should look for when you get there. So you find a few. I've listed out the places that you might look, and I've given you a link. The slides for this and the spreadsheet for this are in your handouts, so you'll want to download them. You probably don't need them right now at the minute, but you'll want them for the exercise as you're doing it for yourself. Okay, then you're going to take this and you're going to do a deeper dive, and we're going to go through titles and other things. So let me just move to my screen, and yeah, we're seeing it now. So I started this process, and I use ProQuest for this process because, and if you and your university give you the opportunity to publish in ProQuest, I recommend it. It's by far the best used database around the world. And I also recommend that you publish open source, because then you'll have people who are outside of the normal realm, but who might be finding and reading your work. Because one of your tasks as you're finishing your dissertation is to write a document that anybody reads after you are done. Of course, your first task is graduate, but after that, you'd like it to have some legs. And so here, what I did was I looked up degrees. I looked up masters and I looked up PhDs. I got about 25 PhDs. I've listed them for you here for our exercises today. And I've also given you the links if you want to follow them. But you go to ProQuest, you go to dissertations, and then you put in your search words, and it's fairly easy to find what you're looking for. And most of your universities your libraries likely will have a subscription. All right, so I did that. And then I developed this, but we're going to start just by looking at the beginnings. So back to my slides. The very first thing that you want to consider when you're looking at your models is what title did they give it? And for that, I'm going to ask you to chat a little bit with me. Go through the models on the screen and tell us, you can just type in the numbers since you can see them. Just put in the ones one, maybe two, that you think are good titles, and then a few words about why you think that's a good title. We'll give it a few minutes, and then we'll see what the discussion amounts to. Okay, so 34 molecular analyses of CRISPR-directed gene editing on a particular gene. Very clear. If you were interested in looking at CRISPR data and CRISPR outcomes, it also I'm going to guess that CRISPR is probably a search word that's used a lot. So I agree with you 100%, Cynthia. It's clear, it's to the point, it's short, and it has searchable tools in it. Who else might have something? Okay, so now we're looking at 26, 29, and 34. So 26, student perceptions of social presence in asynchronous online doctoral programs. 29, examining nurses' faculty credentials and a particular pass rate in pre-licensure nursing programs. And 34, again, the molecular. Simple words, nothing sophisticated and easy to understand in 26. They're also, you do get a sense from them, don't you, of what they're about. And again, can we look for them in terms of, do they have searchable, are the keywords search the things people likely to search for? 32 as a clear title, communication, I think, communion in otherness. Oh, that's interesting. Expanding the circle of community of theoretical inquiry. And that's, oh yes, that's actually one of the ones I'm using as an example. 32. And then I personally like number 33. And what I like about it is that the "but you promised" engages me because it makes me curious. And it engages me as a person, as well as an academic. Now, what we've seen here, and the reason I chose this range, has to do with your field. So you couldn't use the, let's say, trick of the trade in number 33 in engineering as often. But again, your task is to write a title that will be searchable, that will be clear as to what they're getting into, but also that will engage the person, the reader, to be curious or want to look harder. Because you want, if they don't click on your title, they're never going to see the rest. So you want it to be clickable and interesting. And again, your field will determine what you can do about that. Okay, so that's the kind of analysis. This was a quick example to show you what we're doing with this spreadsheet. Is we're building a spreadsheet, and then and now I'll take you into more about what the spreadsheet looks like. So let me go back to the slide. All right, so I've actually built 2 pages. One, and you'll see them. One that has the titles, what it was a degree in, and what it was a degree in. You might not need that. You might be able to use that and just put it all in the last sheet. But you're all going to be, if you find it interesting, then I think you're going to want to do this for yourself. All right, so the top row is the title of the document, this running down the side. The top row is the title. The second row is the URL, so you can click back and find it later. The third is something specific. So in my case, it was the field of study. In your case, it might be well written, or my supervisor, or some other aspect of why you chose that, because you might not choose them all. They might not always be all that similar. The ones that come from your program, the ones that are your methodology, and the ones that are generally your topic may be quite dissimilar in other ways. So you want to remember why the hook for that particular one. And then you go into the other things that we are suggesting that you look at. And once again, I'm going to remind you of the list. Does it make an argument? Can you easily find the argument in the document? And we'll go through that about these and where I found them in a minute. Then you want to be able to compare them across the issues that you will have while you're writing. So that will be formatting, arrangement, and the protocols of research that they adhere to. Then you're going to want to have some kind of a general scale, that one that you make up yourself is fine, that reminds you later of the readability score you would have given it. And finally, you're going to want to look at it to see how strong the conclusion was. Now, the reason you want to put this all together in a concise way is that over the course of your research and writing of your dissertation, this becomes a background document that you can keep going back to when you're in a stuck or I'm going on to the next phase now place. So most of you will do sometimes a prospectus, sometimes a proposal, sometimes both. And then you'll have a period of time when you're collecting data and you're actually doing your research. And then you'll come back and you'll finish the document to look like one of these. So at those different points, I absolutely guarantee you will have different questions about how these people you have chosen to be your models did what they did. So it's useful to have kind of a cheat sheet, and that's what we're building here. All right, let's look at it again. All right, so I decided to go through those issues, and I put in abstract, and then down the left-hand side of your of the spreadsheet that you have, you'll see that it says introduction, each row, chapter, lit review, methods, results, and findings. Now, that basic setup of 5 things is the basic research protocol that everybody plays off of. But that doesn't mean that what you're doing will actually have those exact 5 chapters, nor will it, or you might play around with it. And we're going to look at how the people that I chose for models actually did it. And there's quite a bit of variance. Some of you, but I just have to say about those basic 5 chapters, if you completely understand the logic behind what goes where in those 5 places, then you have the strength to tear them apart. Some of you may be doing, and I didn't actually do, one of these models is not a dissertation based on previous publications. Some of you may be you may be required to get 3 articles published, and then you kind of push them together and you make your dissertation out of that. There is an entire webinar on that specific thing in PD education. So I didn't go into that arena here. But what I want you to hear is that know those 5 steps, know what goes in an introduction, know why a lit review does what it does. And I'll just give you 20 seconds. And then at the end, I've given you lots of resources where if you don't know this backwards and forwards, you can go learn it quickly. In your first introduction to your reader needs to know why you're doing what you're doing, where it falls within your field, generally how you're going to get them through to the end, and why, most important, why it's significant. That's what your reader needs. In the second, but we're academic readers, so then the second thing you have to give us in most cases, is the literature on which you're basing your study. Who did what before you, and how did those ideas come together in a conceptual or theoretical design? And how does that then play out into what I, as your reader, need to know before I read your study? The third thing is the methodology. So how are you studying whatever it is you're studying? Now, those of you in engineering who are doing simulations, you have some very basic stuff that goes on all the time that can be assumed because everyone around you is doing exactly that. So some of you will have to lay out methodologies. Certainly if you're in the humanities and you're doing anything qualitative, you have to really pin down why the justification for that specific kind of qualitative methodology. But your reader needs to know what you're doing and what your research looked like. And then the substance of it is what were the results you found when you did your study? And that's separate from the findings that you pull out of those results. And then you conclude what it means and what we should do with it next. That's the basic 5. All right, so we're now going to go to, I just want to look a little deeper. We've done this at argumentation. Because you are across a number of fields, and argumentation is not something that is set up for everybody, and yet it is an underpinning of every academic article. So an academic article makes a claim. It may not hit you over the head with "this is my claim," but it is claiming significance somewhere, or it wouldn't be written. And then it has evidence that backs up that claim of significance, and then the author ties the evidence back to the claim. That's the basic substance of an argument. So you are going to pull these models, and I recommend that one of the first things you do is you go find out what arguments these people were making. Can you find them? Let's see how the people we studied did on that. All right, so who did I choose? And it was pretty random, but I wanted a variety. And I have already said I liked the title, But You Promised, a meta-analysis of investigation of a contract breach. And so I was curious about it. I also chose Under Construction, Time, Space, and Embodied Labor in Soviet construction narratives post-Stalin, because I think people who do historic and literature study, and this one is language, need to have what they are required to do looked at seriously. And I wanted all of you to see the similarities as well as the differences. A stochastic propagator approach to quantum open. Oh, I cut that off. I've lost my words. Quantum open environmental studies. It is talking about how, I had to really work on this language. It was talking about stochastic, if you're not familiar, is the random probability distribution or pattern that can be analyzed statistically, but it can't be predicted. And then you put that on top of a quantum open system, it becomes very difficult to measure. And so that's the essence of what this one is studying. Communion in otherness, enlarging the circle of community, a theoretical inquiry, which was fascinating in its scope and very different than any dissertation I've ever read. Logic discovery, log discovery, log custody, and web-inspired approach to open distributed systems, because computer science is always important. And then we have a lot of people in the nursing programs who work with PD education because frequently nurses and teachers are very much working in the field all the time, and the jump from that to academic writing can be tough. So we have a lot of resources that have been used regularly by those two. So those were the 6 that I'm working with. And where do you find your arguments? You look at, generally you can find it in the abstract. You're looking for what they think is the importance of their study and how they got there, and what the evidence is, basically. So in the first one, in the meta-analytical investigation, the claim is that there's a psychological contract breach worthy of study. Then the evidence was a meta-analysis. So a huge amount of data were looked at in many, many different ways. And the results are typically the warrant that ties us back to the claim, show that the effects to be evident after a period of time. And when they were evident, after a period of time, but when they were evident, they were substantive. Okay, that's the kind of thing you pull out of an abstract. So this one in about Slavic languages and literature had to do with construction in the Soviet Union in the 70s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and how there was a lot of construction going on, and how actually it was, they don't use the word metaphor, but to me it was a metaphor for how people were living and how they were thinking about their world. So the claim was that there was an examination of this construction in the workplaces. And while the abstract does not conclude or warrant, so this one did not have an abstract that gave me the argument, but I was able to find it when I went to the conclusion that there was a significant tie between actual physical construction going on and people thinking that as long as there was something new happening in the future, they could live with what was happening at the moment. The stochastic propagator claimed that this method would significantly simplify the complexity arising from these two things that are very hard to measure. They used a particular kind of study, and they looked at it in a lot of environments, and he proceeded to apply it, and the claim was that it was robust in the discussions. So that was fairly straightforward. The communion of otherness is claims to investigate the use of inquiry as a potentially transformative in the sphere of people taking the sentient, appreciating the sentience in other species. And the document itself tells the story of, in detail, of pigeons, rats, opossums, and then concludes that when you really study the habits of these creatures, you appreciate them more, and your ability to open in an understanding of the complexities and interrelatedness, the non-duality aspects of life, in a spiritual way, evolves. She comes to the conclusion, and again, it's not in the abstract, but at the end, she comes to the conclusion that while she has stories of this kind of transformation going on, and it was that she felt that she transformed in that way as a result of doing this work, there is no particular proof that people reading her work in the future will have a similar transformational effect. This log, discovery log, custody and web-inspired approach to open distributed systems, discusses the fact that complex computer systems are difficult to troubleshoot. So this is all about how do we query logs? How does the user query logs in a way that helps them troubleshoot even when they don't completely understand the underlying mechanisms of the system that they are involved with. And there was an implied claim but there was no direct claim made that I could find. But the implied claim was that that these doing it this way is new and better, that these are new and better ideas in this arena. But it's sort of dry, and it talks about the inquiry, but it doesn't really take it to the step of making a claim about that I found. And I was perusing. And then in the last one, with the examination of the nursing faculty credentials and pass rates in a pre-licensure system, there was no abstract in the document. All right, this then, I took a bit of time with the abstract because it was easy to talk about. And I wanted you to just see that I have facilitated and read hundreds and hundreds of dissertations from all different kinds of fields over the decade that I've been doing this work, and they are always like this. And that's why I think you're going to really like this exercise when you pin it down for your work. Because when you come out of it, you'll see that, yeah, there's a range here. And where do I want to put my study? And it's not unusual for students that I work with more closely that they would come out of this exercise and they would have decided that A was where they were going to kind of look at model A when it came to writing their abstract, and they were going to, because they liked the way the claim came out, and they're going to look at model B when they decide how their chapters go together, and they're going to look at model C for the way the tables and the references and the appendices worked, because that was closer to what they were doing. So this is where you're going. All right, now let me just switch back, make sure that we're on track. And so you've got a basic idea now. You've got your models, and you've figured out kind of where they're going. Now it's time to drill into how they got there, the very specifics of their writing. So, and this gets a bit complex to talk about in 5 minutes, which is what I'll give it. So I'm just going to do some overview here. Notice I put on the left-hand side the basic 5 elements, let's say, that all of these documents are going to have. But some of them have a lot of these things, and so there was no lit review in 2 of these documents. So where do they put the lit? There has to be some kind of discussion for the reader of what has gone before. And so that's the question then, is if it's not direct, where is the lit? Is that because their program doesn't require it? Perhaps they had to do it separately and it didn't have to be in this final document. Or is it the way they write about what they did that encompasses the lit in each section? And let's see what else I want to say specifically. So that was the first thing I noticed when I'm reading across. Another thing I noticed is that the introduction chapters, if you go to the last one, the examining the nursing facility, you will see a set of headings that is almost the model of all times. There are more dissertations written with these 5 chapters and those particular set of headings across fields than any other. Let's just say it's the old school best way of doing it. And if any of your models use that particular style and you run out of time at the end, know that it is not the sexiest bells and whistles, and it won't be a dissertation that rings bells at the end of the day, but it will get you graduated, because those headings are proven year in and year out, university after university, as being able to help a person who is working through a dissertation and having difficulty putting all these complex ideas together. that set of headings will help you get through it in a linear enough fashion that you can hit the mark and graduate. So what did the people in the middle do that wasn't that? And I just want to look at the study of otherness for a second, because she is the most, if we have these on a continuum of normal dissertations, this study of otherness is at one of the edges in so many ways. And so the first part is that the author is pushing back on norms of society to tell most people that pigeons and rats and opossums were creatures that were sentient and that sentience should be considered before they're just widely exterminated as pests, is a big jump. And to do it in an academic setting and to do it well, and this author does do it very well, in an academic setting requires a lot of background and work. So I recommend that I'm not suggesting that you write to a number of pages because that's the way it's done. I'm suggesting you look at your models in terms of decisions that they made and how much writing they had to do to get there. And the otherness study is 561 pages long. That's a lot of work. So at that point, it's a study that is so personally involving that you can just keep going at that kind of level. And also that particular study, as you would expect, the more pages, the more references underpin those pages. And that particular study had over 1,000 references. So, okay, we've got some breadth here. We've got the big one. There's always one that's a big one. And frequently they are the award winners, by the way, depending on the field. If you are in engineering or in any of the fields that have special interest groups at conferences, then there will be awards given for the best dissertation of that year, and people put up their favorite student. If you can find those award winners, it's not uncommon for them to be very long and complex studies. Okay. Then let me just see what else you might find interesting here. This one also had more chapters. So the way she did this is the otherness study, the way she did what would be the equivalent of methodology and results was she took an animal and she discussed it, and then in a couple of chapters. So she had 8 or 10 chapters. Another person who did more chapters per, let me see. All right, so 4, 5, 6. Looking now at the stochastic propagator approach to quantum open systems. They had 7 chapters, and it was difficult for me to tell where exactly they fit. So you'll see that. You might find that. If you are working on and this is I think I'll stop and then I'll let you ask questions at the end if you have others. But if you're working on a system where you have a lot of lit, sometimes it's handy to divide the lit into 2 chapters. If you are using 2 methodological bases for your work, you're going to do this and then you're going to do this. Sometimes it's useful, or perhaps you're in the lab and you're comparing the A and B. sometimes it's useful to divide that, for your reader's sake, to divide those discussion into 2 chapters rather than 1. So there should be reasons when you break out of that model why you're doing it, or you should be thinking about why you're doing it when you break out of that model. And this comparison point, I hope you might find useful when you have your own model, you've done your own work and you're looking at yours, to remember, oh yeah, there was one in that model that also broke out of the standard chapters. What are the differences? And then finally, I'm going to tell you that as a person who reviews these documents over the course of my career a lot, I can tell an awful lot by the table of contents about what I'm going to read. So when I had a new dissertation come into me, I read the table of contents. It took a half an hour with the table of contents because by then I would have a pretty good idea of where I was going to find weaknesses if I was going to find them. I'd also come away sometimes with being, oh, this looks pretty good. It's pretty straightforward. And I'm really curious to see what they did here and here. And it would let me literally jump into the things that I would want to be able to discuss when I came to the committee meeting. So take your tables of contents and the way you do your headings very seriously, just in case you come across a reviewer that worked like I did. All right, did they all have theoretical frameworks? All but one did. And you can see that the number of references they played off of varied between a low end of 72 and a high end of 1,000. So that's the range that we saw when we looked at this basic system and how they did it. And it's as easy as to put it in your own spreadsheet. It's as easy as getting the PDF and copying and pasting the table of contents into the separate boxes. Not difficult, but when you do, you'll begin to see that the way people think across those boxes varies quite a bit, and you'll begin to think differently about how your writing is going to go. So also length, research format, number of references, etc. That's the way I did it. Readability. What is readability? Well, it's as little jargon as possible with as few redundancies across the whole document as possible. You will have to be redundant because your conclusion chapter may be the only thing they read. Your readers after this, after you go through and you're done and dusted and it's a publication, your readers may read nothing but your conclusion. So you want to tell them in the conclusion quite a bit, and that will be redundant to things you've said. On the other hand, you don't want your poor committee people to be going, oh, this again, when you start every chapter. So those are things that you'll struggle with as you're writing. Each paragraph is 1 point, nothing worse. To look at a document and to see a full page that is 1 paragraph, because you know darn well that in 1 paragraph it made more than 1 point, or that point shifted around quite a bit. So keep the headings to the paragraphs, to the points in the paragraph, strong opening sentences, those things that we all learn, we can learn again and again and again every time we write. And I'm somebody that's written books, and I remind myself of it whenever I was in that environment as well. As a reader, you need to know where you're going and have way markers of where you've been, but you don't need to be hammered over the head with it all of the time. So I'm suggesting that you come up with your own, as you do this exercise, that you come up with your own sense of what you consider a 5, what you would be looking for, and then you rate these people on a scale. So later on, you can come back and you can, oh yeah, this one was a 4 and this one was a or this one was a 3 and this one is a 5, and real quickly you can review and remind yourself as to why that was true, and that sets the format in your mind when you are writing that section of how you want to take it. Makes a whole lot of difference in how easy it is to write each section. And a strong conclusion. I've given you senses of that. Okay, so what I'm suggesting you do next is that you build your own spreadsheet. You do what we've done. And then you come to this. Now you're in the rugged end of your work. So as doctoral students, chances are you're going to run out of time. Chances are the last 6 months of your session are going to be really hard because you won't have gotten quite as much done as you expected. Your writing won't be as easy as you've expected. You'll be sending it off to your committee and they're not getting it back to you. So there's some back and forth things that are difficult. The last 6 months of this degree is just difficult. So know that, and know in your head where you want yours to be according to your model. And then do you want it to be as good as this one, but you'd accept it being as good as this one? And then how do we separate the good from the great? And that's a very personal decision. But you have to base it, or you should base it, on some fairly deep learning about this process that you're in. And if I was going to say anything to you didn't mention to me, I didn't ask either, whether you're just starting or you're almost done. So I tell you what, in your text box, you have a hand. Raise your hand if you want to graduate in the next year. And we'll see how many end game people we really have here. And then we'll know that the rest of you are coming in a bit earlier, and you may have a bit of time to get this exercise and to really hone it and have it up in a place that it'll be useful for you. As you do it, these resources may come in. And so far, I haven't seen any hands go up. So hopefully these will be helpful as well. At PD Education, we have quite a few things. A couple of links I've given you on finding model dissertations and this arguments, theories, concepts, and how you can look at yours against your models. So as you're writing, where you're arguing, those are subtleties that become something that you'll think about. And on writing, how to set up the headings, hugely important. And if you're not good at Microsoft Word, do a search in PD Education on MS Word. And there's maybe even a dozen short videos on setting up Microsoft Word to be your friend. Again, I write books. That's a big, long, icky task. And it helps a lot if you set Microsoft Word up. And your dissertation will be very much like a book when you're done. So, so how to set up headings and how to have them avoid redundancy. And then there's this concept of voice. So I chose some intermediate kinds of ideas here, but throughout all of this, one of the difficulties is you being you at the end, because you know how many times you've read an academic paper and you wanted to go to sleep after the first couple of paragraphs. That is not a person who has a voice. Your voice still needs to be there, even though your work is academic. And so we've done several things about it, but that was a link I thought was interesting. And then I did a 15-minute practical tips on translating research language from one field to another, because integrating different research from different fields in lit can be very interesting and can really add an interesting bit to your work that people will find fascinating, but it takes a bit of challenge. And then this whole theoretical and conceptual framework idea, it may be something that you want to review quickly and then in depth. We have both. And then on dissertations made from published articles, because as I said, when I started this is a good exercise for lots of things. If you need to be 3 published articles, this exercise will work just as well, but you'll have your 3 article table of content will be what you do across the rows. And you also, if you are looking to be published, you can use this very same exercise and do it according to journal articles that you're reading in publications that you would like to be published in. So you choose 2 or 3 articles from that publication, you list it out like this, and you see pretty quickly what that publication has in common with itself. And then you are much more likely to hit the mark when you send it in the first time. Okay, I have 7 minutes left. Hope this was helpful. I'm going to, you please type in questions, and I'll stay as long as there are questions. For those of you who have been watching by recording, I hope this was interesting and useful to you. And as always, we are here to help. So go to the website, see who's at the bottom, and feel free to email us and ask questions about things. I'm glad it was helpful. And I hope it was as helpful for good. I'm glad it was, because you raised your hand and said that you were graduating, hope to graduate this year. So yours might be a quick exercise, but it should help you get some of those things in line. Do we need to sign in to see the links? Specifically, always you'll need to sign into pd.education to see these links. Yes. Typically, you click on them and it takes you to the you have to sign in page. And fingers crossed, most of them will, I think, take you on to what you need to go to next. But that's a bit tricky in technological space, according to some devices. So sometimes you have to sign in and then click. You're very welcome. I have to tell you that in my decade of doing this particular exercise makes the biggest aha difference to people who I've been working with. It's a bit tedious, but it gets to be really interesting when you begin to see the subtleties and begin to think for yourself where those subtleties can take you. So please, PD Education has so many things to help you at every stage of your graduate writing. I like to say we're the A to Z of academic and professional development. Don't hesitate if you're looking for something, and your universities once a month, and read our emails, because on about the middle of the month, you should be, most of you, depends on the particular subscription your university has, but either your university will be sending you a PDF that says this is the track you can go on and where you can find things, or we will be directly sending you an email that has that kind of track on it. And watch, they're here to help. So with that, any questions? Raise your hand if you have a question. I'll be turning off the recording, and I'm here to answer questions if you need it.